Hello, it's a year since the last Tour de France, and to mark that historic anniversary, the organisers have decided to hold another. All right, it's a bit more significant than that. The 100th edition of the race on the 110th anniversary of its founding. So this year, the Tour will do what it does every year, only more so. That is to say, honour its history, those parts of it that deserve to be honoured, while at the same time doing its best to add something significant to that history. For example, the 100th Tour, like the very first one, will take place entirely within France. No foreign excursions on this year's route, yet it's also managing to make its most southerly start ever by coming to the island of Corsica, the one region of France that it's never visited before. Now, that's just the first of a whole series of firsts laid on by the organisers, and if it all goes to plan, it should be a fabulous tour. Of course, if it doesn't all go to plan, it'll be even better. Perhaps that should be the Tour's motto, proudly not quite going to plan since 1903.
The clock is counting down. This is going to be incredible. The crowd has realised it. Laurent Fignon has lost the Tour de France by 8 seconds.
Every year for the past 109, world wars permitting, the organisers have drawn up a route, and from there each race has veered off into a life of its own, with a cast of champions, charlatans and eternal plucky triers, offering up feats of heroism, altruism and outright cheating. And of course, once it's done, each edition of the race enters the archive to mature into myth and brace itself for ever less accurate retellings.
That is disgraceful.
Oh, and Malocky's gone down.
It's a winning ride as Bradley Wiggins punches the sky.
We'll be covering as much Tour history as we can over the next 3 weeks, the good, the bad and the Texan, while still doing our main job of actually covering this year's race. Talking of which, as I'm sure you all know, the reigning champion is not here. In fact, after the unrepeatable high of becoming Britain's first ever winner last year, Bradley Wiggins may never be back, at least to try and win. Bad news for fans, headline writers and the gaiety of Tour life in general. Good news for Chris Froome and for Team Sky's singularity of purpose as they try to follow up an historic first with an historic repeat. Last year's number 2, both on the team and on the podium in Paris, Froome has now overtaken Wiggins as Sky's designated Grand Tour prospect, and he arrives as favourite for the race overall.
I don't think there's really much you can do to be ready for this amount of hype, and certainly the number of journalists who are here today. It's really different to any of the other races we've got on our calendar. So this is, definitely a bit of a surprise to see this. I feel like I'm in super condition. I feel ready, and I've got the support of a really strong team around me. So I'm looking forward to just getting into the race now.
Now, it's a measure of how far and how quickly Froome has developed that he's odds-on to win a race that includes the 2007 and 2009 winner Alberto Contador. Joaquim Rodriguez is third favourite and could form part of a Spanish alliance to gang up on Froome as he, Contador and Alejandro Valverde did in the Tour of Spain last year. Froome's teammate Richie Porte is a serious podium contender himself, while Colombia's Nairo Quintana should make an impact on his debut and will battle last year's best young rider TJ Van Garderen for the white jersey. Of course, Van Garderen starts at least riding for Cadel Evans, the 2011 Tour winner, which could make BMC a dangerous team as long as they focus their rivalry outwards. Same goes for Movistar with Valverde and Quintana. The third former champion in the race is Andy Schleck, still not fully himself after the crash that kept him out of last year's race, but an interesting outsider. In the points competition, Mark Cavendish is second favourite, ahead of Andre Greipel in the betting, but behind last year's convincing green jersey winner Peter Sagan. Cavendish, though, is odds-on to win the opening stage, which for the first time for nearly 50 years is a flat road stage. And having worn both the sprinters and the leaders' jerseys in the Tours of Spain and Italy, getting his first ever yellow jersey here will complete a Grand Tour set.
Well, it's not going to be a given that I'll wear the yellow jersey after Saturday. There's a great crop of sprinters, especially here. Some teams come specifically with the goal of winning stages as well, and so it's definitely not going to be an easy task, but we'll try our best to do so.
Now, Cavendish and Froome are 2 of 6 British riders in this year's race, which is 1 more than 2012. Geraint Thomas returns to the Sky lineup after spending last summer on the track for the Olympics, and he's joined by 2 men riding their first tour, Ian Stannard and Peter Kenyon. David Miller rides his 12th for Garmin. Now, talking of Garmin, Ireland's Dan Martin is back to ride his 2nd tour and having the season of his life, while his cousin Nicholas Roach has moved from AG2R this season to sign for Saxo Tinkoff, so he'll be riding in the service of Alberto Contador. All right, those are some of the riders to watch. Let's take a look at the route they're going to ride, starting to make it worthwhile coming all this way with 3 days in Corsica. 1,000 kilometres of coastline and a land mass that's 2/3 mountain. Other than being stuck out in the middle of the Mediterranean, Corsica could have been made for the Tour de France. And its geography is reflected in the race start. 1 sprint stage, followed by 2 hilly ones. The climbing starts early this year. After a quick ferry crossing, the riders hit the mainland in tight formation for the team time trial in Nice. Just 25 kilometres to limit the time losses for strong riders on weak teams. Marseille is the first of the original 1903 Tour finishes on this year's route. One of a run of stages taking the race across to the Pyrenees and the first summit finish at Aix-Trois-Domaines. Just 2 days in the Pyrenees this year before the race abruptly relocates to Brittany. The port of Saint-Malo is the closest we get to the UK for anyone who fancies a day trip, and stage 10 is one that Mark Cavendish will have highlighted in his road book. But the real spectacle comes the following day with a time trial to the coast and across the causeway to Le Mont Saint-Michel. There, the Tour caravan executes a handbrake turn and heads diagonally southeast at high speed. 3 flat stages for the sprinters and the chancers, which will carry the race towards the Alps. But only after it's tackled the Giant of Provence on Bastille Day, just in case the myth and menace of Mont Ventoux weren't enough on their own to guarantee an historic stage. The final time trial will be no celebration ride for the winner this year. It's the earliest it's been for decades, the Wednesday of the 3rd week, with 3 alpine stages still to come. And the first of them is a buy one get one free special. On stage 18, the Tour will climb Alpe d'Huez as it has 27 times before, then descend it and climb it again through even drunker fans, which has never been done. If that doesn't produce a clear winner, then the final summit 2 days later at Semnoz will. From there, it's straight to Versailles for the coronation. The palace grounds will see the riders off to Paris this year, and there are tweaks to the familiar protocol once they get there. The riders will pass through the courtyard of the Louvre and circle the Arc de Triomphe on their laps of the Champs-Élysées. All of it beautifully lit for television. The final stage of the 100th Tour is an evening affair. Of course, you can see every one of those stages live on ITV4. Start times vary depending on the stage, but the highlights will be a fixture at 7, except for the final evening stage in Paris, which at the start this morning was still officially a long way away. 4 Sundays still to go in this race. 22 9-man teams in the Tour, so 198 riders, and while they took things easy on their way to kilometre zero, the scenery was already in mid-race form. Now, having arrived as favourite, Chris Froome became the first man to crash in this year's race. In fact, before the race had actually begun during the ceremonial rollout. We didn't see him go down and he didn't look hurt, but it was clearly enough to damage his bike, because after a rear wheel change, he had to change the whole machine. He had Geraint Thomas and Edvald Boasson-Hagen to help pace him back, and he was safely in the main field again by the time the flag dropped for the official start of stage 1. And there is stage 1, 213 kilometres starting out from Porto Vecchio in the far south of Corsica. After a loop out and back through the start town, it's then pretty much a straight flat run up the east coast of the island, where the only obstacle will be the wind coming in off the sea. There's certain to be a break, it's doubly certain to be caught before the race hits Bastia, and the result should be a bunch sprint for the Tour's first yellow jersey for the first time since 1965. Well, the break duly formed in the first couple of kilometres, and there were 5 men in it. 2 Frenchmen, Jérôme Cousin of Europcar and Cyril Lemoine of Sojasun. 2 Spaniards, Juan Antonio Fletcher, riding for Vacances Soleil this year after his move from Sky, and Juan José Lobato of the Basque Euskaltel team. With them was 1 lone Dutchman, Lars Boom, of the newly renamed Belkin squad. Now, it wasn't a completely vain enterprise, the breakaway, because before the inevitable catch, the riders knew that the Tour's first jersey was there to be claimed, or perhaps climbed. 45 kilometres into the stage was the small 4th category Côte de Sotta, worth 1 whole point, and the polka dot jersey of the King of the Mountains at the end of stage 1. It looked like an uphill track sprint as the five all tried to psych each other out, but it was Juan José Lobato in the orange Euskaltel jersey who avoided getting sideswiped by Jérôme Cousin and crossed the summit first. Now, more than once the main field came close to catching the five-man break as the race hit the long flat run up the east coast of the island before slowing down to leave them out front. So they are going to take the first 5 places at the intermediate sprint at the 150-kilometre mark, with the favourites for the final sprint moving to the front of the chasing pack behind them to contest the smaller green jersey points.
As we go under the 1,000-metre banner now, the 5 leaders are going to survive at least to contest for the 20 points in the first sprint for the green jersey. But none of these 5 will be featuring in Paris. It's really the sprint for 6th place we're going to have most interest in.
Well, we've left all of the ripples of the start behind us. We're getting into the flat part of this race. This is the domain of the sprinters. These 5 riders are losing huge chunks of time just because of the general acceleration in the main field behind. It's down to inside of 1 minute and 40 seconds. But more importantly to me is who is going to get the best of the lead out in the main peloton behind. Is it going to be Cavendish? Is it going to be Greipel? Is it going to be Matt Goss or Peter Sagan? It's a real psychological sprint, this first sprint of the Tour de France.
It is. They all want to show each other who's going the best, that's for sure. You're absolutely right. And a little attack from Juan Antonio Fletcher, and they're all asleep when he's gone away. No reaction from Jérôme Cousin, the best sprinter, and that is the experience of 10 Tours de France. 20 points over the hill for him. He's being chased by Lars Bohm at the moment, and a big reaction from Bohm as he tries to get him down. Is he going to get him on the line? He's got it. He might do it here, but I don't think Fletcher is faltering.
Well, he's not, but look at Lars Bohm. He's not giving up at all. There's a long way to go, and Lars Bohm has got himself into the slipstream now of Juan Antonio Fletcher, and boom, he's going to come by. And that's his name, by the way.
Yes, Lars Bohm adjusted it well, and he had to react when he did, otherwise he would have been 50 metres too late. Well, that's how much they're valuing this. And I suppose of all 5 men in the breakaway, Lars Bohm is on the outside favourite to candidate for the green jersey, so he's got 20 points in the bag. But this is the sprint we're more interested in now, and the teammates of Peter Sagan, who is the second rider in the line here. Mark Cavendish is in 3rd. Greipel is on Sagan's wheel.
Well, that's Greipel in 3rd place. So he's going to give the big lead out now to Cavendish. Cavendish is onto Sagan's wheel. He's coming around there, but it looks to me like Greipel looks in a good position here.
Greipel has gone for it, and is he going to be challenged by Mark Cavendish? No, and on the line, I think Cav may have got 3rd there. It was very, very tight when it was Greipel, Sagan, Cavendish.
But I'm not sure that Cavendish really dug dead deep into his reserves there. I think he was playing a little bit of the psychological game. It's also psychologically different for a bike rider, Phil, when you try and sprint up towards the line. Yeah, the Just Race Radio just confirming that Cavendish was the second rider in the main field to cross the line just behind Greipel, just getting the wheel ahead of Peter Sagan with that lunge to the line.
Welcome back to stage 1. Now, having stayed away for the first climb of the Tour and the first intermediate sprint, the breakaway finally gave up with 37 kilometres to go, and the field has come back together to race each other, and the wind blowing in off the sea as they roll up the east coast of Corsica towards Bastia and the first sprint finish of this year's race. Of course, wind is one of many factors on the race that can't be controlled. Unless you're Chris Boardman, he spent time in the wind tunnel for us this year, making his own weather and drawing some fascinating conclusions.
It was because of a book written in 1961 and a trout we find ourselves standing here in the wind tunnel of Southampton University, also home to Great Britain cycling team's Secret Squirrel Club. And it was a member of that clandestine organisation, Rob Lewis, an aerodynamicist, who, on first seeing a picture of a sleek time trial machine, instantly asked me why there were so many cables dangling in the wind, because cylinders, he said, in airflows are bad. He then sent me this book marked at 2 particular pages because he wanted me to see 2 particular pictures. The first image showed a wire next to a proper aerofoil section, the shape of which, despite being many times the size, was so much better it offered the same air resistance. Rob postulated that if the wire was scaled up to the same size as bicycle brake cables, they'd cause the same drag as dangling a couple of trout off the handlebars. And from that point on, like the fish, I was hooked. In past years, we've done a little bit to try and illustrate the impact of airflow on the sport of cycling. But this year, we've got all sophisticated. And to help us answer our bag full of airflow-related questions, we've got some high-tech equipment, some experts on aerodynamics, and of course, Ned. Right now, Ned is riding into a 44 km/h headwind, about what you'd expect in the closing stages of a tour day. To sustain this, a rider of his size would need to be producing about 400 watts. In short, he'd be absolutely on the limit. Now, if we put a rider in front of Ned,
his power demand to ride at the same speed drops a whopping 49%. That's 2,500 calories over the course of a tour day. Put a couple of teammates in front of him, that could easily drop another 20%. And back in the amorphous mass of athletes, there's times in a tour day when he could be riding at 0 watts, while the man on the front is pulling his tripes out. So being so close to the man in front offers massive and measurable advantages. But what if it starts raining and Ned's a little bit nervous about riding so close to the wheel in front and starts to leave a gap? With every centimetre further away from the wheel Ned gets, that erodes his benefit. And that's sideways too. If Ned wants to see where he's going in a tightly packed bunch, well, that's going to cost him a lot as well.
So now you know why riders travel so close to the man in front, even in treacherous conditions. Why riders weave around the road chasing the camera motorbike or use the cars to get sucked back to the bunch after a puncture. And why the sprinters want to wait until the last possible moment until coming out of shelter.
Is the missile going to hit his target for the 21st time? And yes, he does.
These are aero interactions in their crudest and simplest form. A bit of aero knowledge known to most riders intuitively. You get a bit closer, it gets easier. You get further away, it gets harder. Well, it might be simplistic, but this is going to govern most of the behaviour you see in this bike race over the next few weeks.
Yes, well, race radio crackling with that famous term, échappée terminée. The breakaway is over. Nervous moments now. We're around about 3/4 of an hour to go to the finish.
You just watch these narrow roads now, Paul. These traffic reservations are always a bit of a worry at this stage because the main body of the peloton is basically unsighted.
Yeah, but you can see now that these guys are starting to take a serious interest in stretching out the main field. They want to make it a little bit safer. They want to stretch it out so that there are guys. And as you said earlier, Phil, 25% of the peloton in this Tour de France are first-timers. They'll be extremely nervous. They'll want to take crazy risks so that mum and dad at home can see them on the television. And that's what makes the final 35 kilometres very dangerous indeed.
Absolutely right. 198 riders in the Tour de France. 54 have never been here before. And I bet they were shocked when they saw just how big this event was when they assembled 2 days ago here on the island. It's Andrew Talansky setting the pace just now at the front for Radio Shack, really piling on the pressure. But look at the difference in speed now. Everybody put back in the place in the Tour. The sprinters calling on the helpers to keep the pace so high, nobody can get off the front and escape their grip.
This is all the battle for seconds now, the battle for psychology to make sure that you don't lose any time on the opening days, because all of a sudden you can come around a corner like that, there's a big traffic circle in the way, there's a split in the main field, and you've lost 15 seconds. You don't want to do that on the first day.
So, Paul, as we look from the helicopter here, boy, there's a whole new ball game down there now.
Well, this is in fact the acceleration in the last 40 minutes of the race, and we've moved up to speeds approaching around about 50 kilometers an hour, 31, 32 miles an hour in the main field. And the reason for this is what's happened now is the guys who want to win this bike race overall, they want to be in the first 25 and 30 positions, because they know all of a sudden on the running towards the finish there could be a split in the main field, and Alberto Contador doesn't want to lose 15 or 20 seconds. Well, he's got his team on the front here. This is a sign of confidence.
He's put his team on the front to drive the pace, and they have lifted this up to probably in excess of 55 kilometers an hour, 30, 35 miles an hour. So nobody can get off the front. Everybody looking around to see what damage they're doing. I take my hat off to Contador. Nobody was expecting this from his team.
But what I'm looking for, Phil, are the black and blue jerseys of Team Sky, and they are very much not present at the front end of the main field, but maybe they're listening to my commentary, because over on the right-hand side now you can see the black and blue helmets of Team Sky moving to the front as a single block to move Chris Froome into a comfortable position as well.
And keep him safe and sound, because as we run in towards Bastia, the roads aren't like this, believe me, and they've got to be very, very vigilant. There's 2 races now. There's one race for the race favourites to keep out of trouble, and there's one race for the sprinters who want to win the day, because yellow is the prize for the winner. Look at the length of that line. These riders, first timers in the Tour today, must have wondered what has happened.
They now know what the Tour de France is all about, and if you look at that long line, some of those guys might never ever make contact with the front of the pack before they get into Bastia, and there are gaps appearing as well. It looks as if this rider here, Bouet's had a very difficult time getting himself back into the main field because of that sudden acceleration. He's sitting on the back of the referee's car, he's just waiting for a slight pause, and then he'll flick around the referee's car and get himself onto the tail end of the pack. This is the move.
Well, as they push the pace now, Sky has rushed up to the front to try and get control of the head of the peloton here, bring a little bit of sanity back into the main field.
On the face of it, it seems extraordinary that this is the first time in 100 outings the Tour has paid a visit to Corsica. After all, it's a significant lump of France. Sort of, but we'll come to that in a minute. And besides, if it's been to London, Rotterdam and Berlin already, then you'd have thought by sheer weight of probability the race would have pinned its flag down on the island of beauty by now.
So Corsica has defied probability, which is because Corsica defies pretty much everything, including easy definition. It is resolutely different, sometimes even dangerously so, and has the highest murder rate, for example, per capita in Europe. That said, as this panorama hopefully proves, it is extremely beautiful.
So let's start with the basics. Is it French? Well, these days it mostly is, but for years it was ruled by Rome and then by the Genoese before the French bought the island from them in the 18th century. Already, though, a separate culture and language had developed. The second language is the endangered Corsican, a kind of Franco-Italian hybrid.
Of course, the first and the best starting point for any serious student of French culture is obviously Asterix. And when Messieurs Goscinny and Uderzo wrote the Corsican adventures of the plucky, magic potion doping Gallic warrior and his fat stone-carrying chum, they felt moved to write a special introduction detailing the characteristics of the average cartoon Corsican.
Nonchalant, hospitable, loyal, faithful, attached to their motherland, eloquent, courageous and much more besides. And above all, they are touchy. And we haven't even started on their vigorous cheeses, their propensity for violent vendetta, or their love of a good siesta.
Leave, you're free. I said leave, you're free. Hey, leave, you're free!
After my siesta.
Rather than dwell incessantly on stereotypes of indolence and criminality, the Corsican Tourist Board quite naturally are keener to play up their connection to Napoleon. You see, Bonaparte was born on this island, in Ajaccio, in fact, on the western coast where the race heads on Sunday, and he spoke all his life with a marked Corsican accent.
The Tour finishes just down the road from Napoleon's final resting place in Paris, but it is fitting in a kind of simplistic tricolour waving kind of way that it heads for Corsica to get things started. With thousands of extra visitors on the rock, the place is officially full. The Tour has commissioned a huge ferry just to cope with some of the overspill. So with all these extra nightly bodies on the island, the battle for the place to lay your head, and a simple meal of wild boar could prove to be an adventure.
But then again, you don't want to believe everything you read in Asterix.
There is the 20 kilometres to go banner as the peloton, because they've compressed on the narrow roads again now, the riders who race so hard to claim front positions can ease off now because they've got those front positions that they wanted.
Big problem there, Phil, is what happens if you're in a situation like this and you bottle out a little bit and you touch the brakes. You slip back 25 or 30 positions in that main field, and then you've got to use excessive energy to battle your way up. But where can you move up there? Almost every centimetre of the road is taken up. You've got to take risks. You've got to wait for maybe a little few people at the side of the road and scoot round one rider and scoot round another rider to fight your way up to the front. But you can see on the right-hand side there, the line of riders in the red and black jerseys of BMC Racing. Well, that's Cadel Evans. He knows how to do this. He's done it for years and years. He's got the serious experience, and he's looking to win the Tour de France one more time. He's actually said, despite riding the Giro d'Italia in the month of May, he feels he's come into this Tour fresher than in previous years.
Well, as we look here with Jens Voigt on the front.
Voigt doing a lot of chatting there. There's Sylvain Chavanel, the rider in the pale blue with the pale blue shoulders and the red, white and blue around the middle. He realises that he could be the secret weapon for Mark Cavendish this afternoon. He will dedicate himself to his teammate a little bit later on. Oh, there's a crash. There's a crash gone down.
Crash. Somebody's clipped the banner there on the right of the road.
Yeah. Well, that's Johnny Hugeland. It's the Dutch national champion. He was just on the outside, and they were just trying to make the race nice and safe. And Hugeland went down there very hard indeed. You can just see the red, white, and blue jersey.
Well, that is a real shame. That is a case of deja vu. It was on the right-hand side of the road. We had that terrible accident a couple of years ago with Johnny Hugeland. Well, let's hope he's okay. He's about 15 kilometres out from the finish, so he's got to chase. He'll lose time, but he won't be too worried about that. Let's hope he's okay. That's the most important thing. The peloton continues on, and I can tell you that the Orica Green Edge bus is trapped beneath the finish banner on the finishing line. And in about 18 minutes' time, the peloton will be coming in. So it's going to cause some consternation for the moment.
Well, the organisation are going to have to take care of that very, very quickly. There's a lot of control by the gendarmes and the fire officers. There's been a lot of support here for the Tour de France coming into Corsica. It's going to be a big battle for the organisation to clear this one out of the way, as in the main field they won't know what is going on here. They will be a little bit concerned about the race.
12.5 kilometres to go. I think they're now contemplating, Paul, removing the finishing banner, because I'm not sure they have the ability to lift it any higher.
Well, it's complicated, and it's a battle, and it's a battle that's going to have to take place in a very short period of time, because, Phil, we're only about 15 minutes away from the finish line, or 12 kilometres to go. And the riders, there's been another crash in the main field down towards the back. That's come over Radio Tour.
And it looks like Sagan's lost one of his teammates, Moreno Moser, the sprinter on the right there, moving off in that lime green jersey as well.
Well, again, this is why I've always said you have to ride as close as you can to the front end of the main field. These crashes nearly always happen in the back 30%. Just having a quick look down there to see who's been involved in that accident. Obviously, one of the first riders, number 17, Moreno Moser. He's had a very good start to the season, but here he went down very hard. The rider gone down there from Team Sky. 171, that's a bit sad as well, because that is rider Heyerdahl. He had a very nasty crash in the Giro d'Italia. He's helped there by one of his teammates from Australia, Rowan Dennis. Tense moments for not only the sprinters in this bike race here this afternoon, but very tense moments for the race organisers, because still around about 12 or 13 minutes to go to the finish line. The Orica Green Edge bus is still stuck under the finishing banner. So Stuart O'Grady was the Orica Green Edge rider on the front. There is the mass of lime green jerseys. The second rider there in that line, of course, Peter Sagan. Big favourite for today's finish, while Cadel Evans doesn't pay any attention to these battles, just holds his line.
Welcome back to stage one of the Tour de France, with the peloton winding itself up for the first bunch sprint of the race. We did hear news filtering through before the break of a bus blocking the finish line. Well, there is, and here it is, the Orica Green Edge team bus rolling towards the finish line and then hitting it, or at least the solid structure that sits over it to make it visible to the riders as they roll in. As part of it broke off and hit the ground, the bus driver did the only thing he could in the circumstances. He put his head in his hands and prayed for the ground to open up and swallow him. At least that would have dislodged the bus, which was stuck, unable to get through the line or reverse back down the finishing straight. Understandably, there's not much in the race manual to cover things like this, and while the officials at the finish frantically try to make sure there is a finish, the riders are getting ever closer, just over 8 kilometres from Bastia.
As we watch the race, there's two races to talk about now, Paul. There's the bus stuck under the banner, and there's Peter Sagan's team now driving at the front to try and drag their man into the finishing line. The only question is, where is the finishing line?
Well, they are saying that the finishing line of the stage is going to be at 3 kilometres to go. They will tell the riders what their positions are, and then the riders have to come down here to the presentation area. But they will not get across the finishing line here this afternoon.
Peter Sagan's Cannondale team are doing their job for their sprinter. Stuart O'Grady drives for Orica Greenedge. It's his team bus which is causing the problem at the finish right now. Marcel Kittel's boys in white, they're working on the far left. Mark Cavendish, boys in blue, they're working on the far right.
That is what has created the problem here at the finish line.
He's totally wedged under there at the moment because the actual banner's ripped through the air conditioning system, and he's stuck under there. They can't get the banner to move off the top of the bus.
The finish of today's stage of the Tour de France will be held at 3 kilometres to go. There is a photo finish there. That is going to be the point where they will cross the line to get the victory. But how can the riders figure that out? They've only had about 10 minutes to try and change their tactic. They've been looking at finishing on the beach front.
You can't finish at 3. There's a bend in the road.
Well, that's unfortunately the only way they're going to be able to do it.
As we speak, the bus is backing off the finishing line. Now what will they do? Because they might well get this away. They're getting it down the road, and they're trying to get it into an area where he can get it onto the beach. There it is. And that is the escape route on the left of our picture for all the smaller vehicles. Now, will the bus be able to get down there behind our commentary box? If they do that, Paul, we can go back to business as usual.
Yeah, but how do the riders handle that, Phil? Because they're being told one thing, then they're being told another thing. In the final few minutes of a stage of 213 kilometres, 130...
Oh, another crash! Oh, a massive pile-up as they all touch wheels again.
Cavendish is there.
Cavendish on the left of our picture is involved in this one. He's not hurt, but he's riding away as the peloton race on. That was a big pile-up. Let's have a look at that again. It was one of Cavendish's teammates who was first to go down, and that's why Cavendish was involved. He was not too far away from him.
Peter Sagan is there as well. The big contenders for today's victory have gone down.
And so we go back up to the front here now. Is Andre Greipel up here? Cavendish has
went
gone.
Down.
Sagan has gone. There is Sagan, and he's got his rips on the left shoulder of his jersey.
Well, and it's such a shame at an end of a race like this, and now we've got to see what the organisation is like. There's still a lot of riders in there from Argos Shimano.
Well, and the question is, where are we finishing the race? Because the bus, I think, is off the course now.
Yeah, they've
so
managed
we're
to get it
racing
away.
Back to the finishing line now. And the crash has taken out the two top sprinters in the same crash. They will not rejoin in time to contest the sprint.
There's a move on the right-hand side there coming from Movistar, and that will be for JJ Rojas, their big sprinter. Now it's complete and utter chaos at the front end of the peloton as Orica Greenedge have disappeared, and it's now the turn of Vacansoleil.
And because that crash has happened outside three...
Greipel is
there's
out.
Greipel standing on the roadside, the three top sprinters. Marcel Kittel now must be thinking it's his birthday, because I think he is still up in that lead group. And because they were outside 3 kilometres from the finish, those riders will lose time.
No, well, it's 3 kilometres to the 3 kilometre mark, so they will get the same time. What a complicated day in the sport of professional cycling here this afternoon. Don't forget that the first man to finish will be the yellow jersey. Movistar are in control at the front end of the main field.
And I'm not surprised now, because Rojas is now accelerated up to being one of the top sprinters left in this group. I'm pretty sure Marcel Kittel survived that shunt. He's still up here, and he is probably the fastest of the sprinters left in the peloton. Can he get it right? Because Matthew Goss is still up here as well.
Yeah, Matthew Goss just over there on the left-hand side. Argos Shimano, 1, 2, 3 in the white jerseys. Got themselves very organised here with Kittel in third position.
Some of these riders are looking around, not just for position, but wondering where on earth is Sagan, Greipel and Cavendish gone, because they crashed further down the group here. This is Argos Shimano getting control, so there's no doubt that Marcel Kittel is still in with the chance.
Well, there's the organisation around these corners. This is not the best place for the stage of the Tour de France to finish here this afternoon.
No, it is not, but they're safely around that corner, and the leaders dragging them out are from Argos Shimano here. As we line up now for the finish, and Kittel, it's a perfect sprint for Marcel Kittel if he is in position to get it.
Yeah, but you know what? They've managed to get themselves through the 3 kilometre to go point. They will have taken the photo finish, but now they're alongside the seaside. They're at the point where they can now start to lead this sprint out. There'll be a lot of risks taken now, Phil, because these guys will be thinking it's a very rare opportunity to win a stage. Greg Henderson is in there. He's normally the lead-out man for Andre Greipel. Now, this could be a special day for him.
Well, the riders are throwing in. They're onto the beach road here now. The sea is on the right of our picture. The wind has completely dropped, so that's not a factor anymore here now as they try to get through. Gert Stegmans is also in on the act at the moment, but they're losing control of this race because they can't understand where are all the sprinters.
91, that is Alberto Contador. He's off the back, but the race radio has already announced that they will be giving all of the riders involved in that accident the same time at the end of the day.
Well, it is the way the Tour de France is. It's a live show, and it all started with the trapping of the Onica Green Edge bus, but as this rider here has slipped away as he races up towards the line, they're still trying to organise the sprint here, and they're still looking for everybody as Lotto continue to try and win this stage. But watch out for Henderson, because he could finish it off and get a good result as they start to race for the line here now. Peter Kenner, I think it is trying to get in on the act for Sky as they come up on the inside. Everybody dashing for gaps on the line, but on the far right of the picture, it is going to be on the line. Marcel Kittel gets the victory. Well, it all fell in place for Argos Shimano. It's Kittel's second Tour de France. He didn't finish last year, but this year he starts with a win. Win number 12 of the year for him, and he gets a yellow jersey.
Well, Phil, that was probably one of the most chaotic Tour de France stages I've ever seen. Look at the man in the white jersey here. He's waiting. Lotto Belisol tried to sort it out for their lead-out man, Greg Henderson, but the big man from Germany starts to get the turbo whistling at this point, and all of a sudden he realises how important a day it's going to be for him as he lunges for the line. He just looks under his shoulder there, bang, and he gets the victory he was looking for.
Well, let's deal with the stage result before we get on to the madness that overshadowed it. Marcel Kittel won from Alexander Kristoff, with the youngest man in the race, 19-year-old Danny van Poppel, third, and David Miller making a rare appearance in a bunch sprint fourth. Then it was Matteo Trentin, Samuel Dumoulin, Greg Henderson and Jürgen Rohlens. Behind them, the rest of the field rolled in at irregular intervals, all of them on the same time as the winner, the timings for the stage having been neutralised due to the extraordinary circumstances, but not all of them as healthy as when they started. Now, the bus driver may not have been the guilty party in this, because the finish line gantry has two positions, raised for any vehicles that need to get through it, and then lowered for the race finish. So it may have been a matter of miscommunication, or indeed traffic, which, given that there's really only one main road from Porto Vecchio to Bastia, may have delayed the bus's arrival. That was embarrassing for Orica Green Edge and the race organisers on the opening day showpiece of the 100th Tour. More serious for the riders was the crash that came just outside 4 kilometres from the finish. You can see here the banded white jersey of Andre Greipel having a leaning contest with a Radio Shack rider outside him. They managed to stay up, but inside them, Tony Martin of Omega Pharma Quickstep goes down, and that starts the chain reaction. You can see Geraint Thomas, lower left, in a group of 3 Black Sky jerseys with their blue stripe, goes somersaulting. Behind him, Alberto Contador in blue goes down. Peter Kenyon of Sky manages to stop before he hits him. Chris Froome, just coming into frame at the bottom, does the same. Up ahead, Mark Cavendish in the white jersey of British national champion is forced off the road to the left, but he stays up too. The results of Contador's crash were visible as he rolled in, surrounded by teammates. Peter Sagan had ripped his jersey and lost some skin too. Geraint Thomas looked fine at the finish, but went to hospital for precautionary x-rays along with Ian Stannard. They were both fine. Not so Tony Martin, the World Time Trial champion, had a broken collarbone and became the first man to abandon this year's tour. So let's do a quick health check among the others, starting with Mark Cavendish.
Yeah, I'm okay. I didn't crash, thank you. I was just behind the crash.
What did you think of that stage in terms of the tension in the peloton?
It wasn't too bad. It wasn't too different to normal at the Tour de France. I think what caused the problems was changing the finish. Like we heard in the radios, with literally 5k to go, the sprint was in 2k, and then we're like a k later, like no, it's at the finish, and we're like, it's just carnage, you know. But
what's going through your head? It must be very strange to have such expectation and then suddenly it all sort of disappears and you're standing at the side of the road.
I'm not the only one. I think the majority of the favourites for today's stage were caught up. Like, I'm lucky I didn't come down, you know. I was behind it, you know. I see even my teammates are a lot worse off. Tony Martin's in a bit of a state here, so you know, I can count myself pretty lucky.
Chris Froome, as we saw, managed to avoid the bodies in front of him, and Mike for once have benefited from riding a bit towards the back.
Chris, a little blood on the knee there. Was that from the fall in the neutralised zone?
That's it, yeah. There was a bit of a tricky corner there, and well, yeah, got through the rest of the day unscathed. So if that's the only crash I have this tour, I'll take that.
It's been quite a warning this stage, hasn't it, of some of the traps that are in store for you?
No, definitely. I mean, I didn't think any of us expected it was going to be plain sailing today, but there were some pretty brutal crashes in the final there, and again, just another reminder that that this tour is about so much more than just having the form and being here. It's about staying out of trouble and actually looking after ourselves in the peloton at the same time.
Now, in the middle of all this madness was the greatest day of Marcel Kittel's career. His first Tour de France stage win and the first yellow jersey of the 100th edition of the race.
Yeah, of course. Unfortunately, they crashed today. It's always nice to compete against the best and to show that you can win also against them. And not only if there is a crash. So I'm looking forward to the next flat stages, to sprint against Andre and Mark.
It takes nothing away from the yellow jersey that you have, but it's going to be hard to defend, isn't it, the next 2 days?
Yeah, it's not really a perfect profile for me, but to be honest,
is it doable? Can you do it? Can you do it? You say it's not perfect, but can you get over them?
Yeah, to be honest, I don't want to think about it now. I just enjoy the yellow jersey, and we will see tomorrow.
Well, Marcel Kittel should enjoy it, because he won't enjoy tomorrow. Stage 2 starts here in Bastia, but it couldn't be much more different from Stage 1. The route takes the riders almost immediately inland towards the 2/3 of Corsica that is mountain. 4 climbs on the route, the toughest of them the second category Col de Vitsavona. At just over 1100 metres, that should be enough to dislodge Marcel Kittel from the main field. And the little kick of the Côte de Solario, 12 kilometres from the finish in Ajaccio, should stop him getting back on. Now, all things being equal, that should be a stage win and the second yellow jersey of the Tour for Peter Sagan. But as we've seen today, Chris, things on the Tour are not equal. I don't suppose you'd like to make a prediction for tomorrow, would you?
No, and that's why we like watching, really, isn't it? It's going to be an interesting day.
And you've got to feel sorry for the Orica Green Edge bus driver, regardless of whose fault it eventually turns out to be, whether it was his or the Tour organisation's.
Yeah, obviously it's about as embarrassing as it gets, really, in the focus of the world's media, and almost stopping an entire stage of the Tour de France. So it's just one of those things. Everybody will move on. And
the Yorkshire delegation, who are here planning for next year, will have been scribbling in their notebooks, I'm sure, as they saw the chaos that surrounded the end of today's stage. And talking of 2014, here's the competition. Be part of the Tour de France next year with VIP tickets to the Grand Etape in Yorkshire. You'll stay in a 4-star hotel, receive passes to the Village Départ and VIP tickets to the team presentation. We'll also throw in £1,000 spending money and his and hers Boardman bikes. 3 runners-up will receive the latest Wii U console courtesy of Nintendo. For your chance to win these great prizes, just call 09012 930 678. Calls cost no more than £1.03 from BT landlines. Other networks may be higher and mobiles considerably more. Or text the word TOUR to 83000. Text cost £1 plus 1 standard network rate message. Or there's free entry at the website. Entrants must be 18 or over. Entries made after lines close on Monday the 8th of July at 5:30 p.m. will not be counted, but may still be charged. Best of luck with that, and best of luck to everyone involved in this race with Stage 2 tomorrow. You know, we knew coming in that the 100th Tour was 3,404 kilometres long. I don't think it had occurred to anyone before today to ask what its maximum headroom was.